How aware are we, really, of the way we experience time? Why did we accept the 12-month Gregorian calendar so completely without ever really questioning it? And what else have we accepted without stopping to ask why? That's exactly what I want to get into here. There's something strange about the calendar, and I don't mean that in some metaphorical way. I'm not saying it as an emotional reaction or as one of those time flies observations. I mean there's something structurally strange about it, mathematically strange, something you can actually point to and examine. And the more I looked into it, the harder it became to believe that this was just random messiness. At the most basic level, here's the issue. The Gregorian calendar, the one hanging on your wall, the one on your phone, the one that controls birthdays, deadlines, and every financial quarter, is actually pretty irregular. The months are split into 28, 29, 30, and 31 days. February shrinks, then grows. Weeks don't fit cleanly into months. Months don't line up neatly across the year. And after a while you start wondering, was this calendar really designed for human beings? Or should we be looking for a different logic behind it? Maybe control, maybe confusion, maybe the need to create a system where people don't feel time instinctively anymore, but have to keep checking it from the outside. That probably sounds like a big claim. Don't dismiss it right away, because there is another possibility. And honestly, there always was. Imagine a calendar that is simple, orderly, and much more in tune with nature and lunar rhythm. Once you really understand it, the Gregorian calendar doesn't just start to look messy, it starts to look broken. The basic structure is simple: 13 months, 28 days each. 13 times 28 is 364. That gives you exactly 52 weeks. Every month is exactly 4 weeks. Every year follows the same rhythm, no interruption, like a machine. Then you add one extra day outside the monthly count, like a transition day, a special day, even a sacred day in many older traditions. And that brings you to 365, a full solar year. What makes that system interesting isn't just how clean it is, it also feels natural, almost intuitive. And the more I looked into this, the more I realized this wasn't some fringe theory sitting in a dusty corner. A lot of major civilizations that built extraordinary things seem to have used systems very close to this. The Maya, the ancient Egyptians, the Druids of pre-Roman Britain, the Lakota, the Yoruba. Completely different places, completely different eras, but strangely similar rhythms. 13 months, 28 days. And at some point, you can't help but stop and think, why does the same logic keep showing up in so many different cultures? And this is where it gets even more interesting. The trace of it is already inside the human body. The menstrual cycle averages 28 days, roughly 13 cycles in a solar year. That's not mysticism, that's biology. The body was already carrying this rhythm long before we invented calendars. And then there's the moon. When you actually look at lunar cycles, the idea of 28 days doesn't feel random at all. It's not a perfect one-to-one match, but there is a very obvious closeness between the rhythm of the moon and the rhythm of the body. So when ancient societies looked at the sky and tried to build time around it, that doesn't seem strange at all. It almost feels like at some point people looked up at the sky, then looked at themselves and realized these things are already moving in the same rhythm. But somewhere along the way, something changed, and what we ended up with was a much messier system. Even the names of the months come from Roman rulers. July from Julius Caesar, August from Augustus. And we know even the lengths of the months were adjusted over time. So naturally another question comes up. When did time stop belonging to nature and start belonging to politics, institutions, and the state? As far as I can tell, the answer is this: the moment it was taken away from nature and handed over to institutions. And that's where things get even more interesting. Because this knowledge wasn't completely lost. In the early 20th century, people were seriously debating this. Scholars, philosophers, statisticians, administrators. They knew the Gregorian calendar was irregular. They were openly proposing something cleaner, more logical, more balanced. One of the clearest examples is the International Fixed Calendar. Moses B. Cotsworth worked on it seriously. And his idea was basically built on that same structure: 13 months, 28 days, every month identical, every quarter equal, every year beginning in the same rhythm. He even gave the 13th month a name, Sol, placed between June and July. And the really interesting part is this: it didn't just stay theoretical. George Eastman, the founder of Kodak, actually used it inside his company. From 1928 to 1989, that's not some short experiment, that's 61 years. Why? Because it worked. Accounting got easier, planning became cleaner, quarters were balanced, administrative burden dropped. So this wasn't some utopian fantasy. It was practical, it actually functioned, and that's where things get even stranger. Because at the time, this idea was being taken seriously at an international level. The League of Nations put it on the agenda. Committees were formed. Proposals came in from all over the world. This was not fringe, it was a real conversation. And then, suddenly, it fades. Not slowly, not after some huge, famous public debate. It just feels like it got covered over. No big victory speech, no clear rejection, no convincing final argument. The subject just dissolves, and the existing system stays exactly where it is. That's the part that really started to bother me, because if a system is more orderly, more symmetrical, more useful, and serious people are actively defending it, then why didn't it happen? It's easy to say, well, maybe it just wasn't good enough. But that feels too easy, because the people backing it were influential. There was real-world proof it could work. The logic behind it was strong. So the question starts to change. Instead of asking, if it was better, why wasn't it chosen? You start asking, who benefits from the disorder? Irregular months create irregular accounting. Irregular accounting creates more mediation, more correction, more interpretation, more internal complexity. You can't compare quarters cleanly. You can't compare months evenly. Everything needs adjustment, conversion, explanation. And after a while, you start thinking, maybe this isn't just habit. Maybe there are interests protected by that complexity. And then you start to realize this may not be just a calendar issue. Across history, systems that aligned human life with nature, seasons, the moon, and the body seem to have been replaced by systems that align people with institutions, clocks, fiscal years, and reports. And after a while, it stops looking like a one-time event. It starts looking like a pattern. One of the things that really pulled me in was the old physical evidence. Take the stone circles in Britain. Not just Stonehenge. There are other sites too that seem to hint at a 28-day rhythm. At Stonehenge, the Aubrey holes number 56, exactly 2 times 28. For a long time, people have suggested that this could relate to lunar tracking. Then you look at the Maya calendar, and again you keep running into the number 13. In ancient Egypt, again, you find extra days outside the regular monthly count. Different cultures, different centuries, but a strangely similar logic. And again, the same question comes back. If this knowledge was once so widespread, what happened to it? When did the break happen? And when you look at moments of historical transition, you start seeing something interesting. Rome spreads its own calendar and suppresses local systems. The Gregorian reform comes in, and some societies literally lose days. People go to sleep in one calendar and wake up in another. And all of that is always explained to us as correction, modernization, scientific progress. But really, these were political decisions too. This wasn't only about measuring time better. It was about deciding which understanding of time would count as legitimate. And once you control time, you control the system built around it. Another thing I can't stop thinking about is this. The people carrying out these transitions often don't seem to fully understand what they are abandoning or what they are adopting. It feels like the decision comes from above, and everyone else just implements it. And even in the archives, you feel that. Especially around the calendar reform debates of the 1920s, there are missing pieces. Important correspondence is incomplete. Some documents are referenced but not there. Some meetings are summarized, but the substance is missing. And you start asking yourself, why is there always silence around the most important moments? And maybe the question that hit me hardest is actually a very simple one. What would it feel like to live in a world where every month had the same length? What would it feel like to know where you are in the year without checking a device? What would life feel like if work, rest, celebration, and waiting all moved in a more stable rhythm? I'm not trying to say ancient mystical life was better. I'm asking something much more practical. What does this kind of irregular time structure do to the human body and mind? That's basically what chronobiology is starting to explore now, how deeply human health and psychology are tied to natural rhythms. The field is still young, but the question it opens is a big one. What if the calendar is not just a calendar? What if biology, psychology, authority, and social order are all tangled up in it? What does it mean to feel time without checking it? Think about that. Some indigenous communities kept 28-day counting systems well into modern times, and when you read the observations made about them, you get this feeling that their relationship to time was different. Less panic, less stress, a different kind of waiting, a different relationship with the present, as if time wasn't chasing you, as if you were living inside it. For a long time, we dismissed that as primitive. But what if that wasn't the primitive thing? George Eastman died, and in 1989, his company quietly went back to the Gregorian calendar. No big public announcement, no real explanation. Even today, there are still small groups defending the 13-month, 28-day system. But are they mainstream? No. Is it taught in schools? No. Are large institutions backing it? No. And when you step back and look at all of this, maybe you don't see one giant conspiracy, but you do see a repeating pattern. A rhythm aligned with nature gets replaced, and in its place comes a rhythm aligned with institutions. And once you notice that, it becomes very hard not to keep seeing it. I'm not saying the Gregorian calendar is evil, and I'm not saying a 13-month calendar is magical. I'm just asking, why did a system this orderly, this logical, this predictable, a system that seems to leave traces across so many cultures, end up pushed to the margins of history? And when we lost the rhythm, what exactly did we lose? Maybe lost isn't even the right word. Maybe it was taken. Maybe it was quietly replaced. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all. The knowledge wasn't destroyed. Because if you destroy something, it leaves traces. But this wasn't destroyed. It was replaced with something else that looked useful enough. Slowly, piece by piece. Quietly enough that no one would scream. Softly enough that most people would never notice what was missing. We never mourned 13 months, because no one told us they had ever existed. We never missed the rhythm, because we were born out of rhythm already. We were handed a broken clock, and told it was the only clock that had ever existed. And maybe that's where the real question begins. What else have we accepted without ever thinking to question it?